Well, Jagmeet Singh will finally get his shot to win a seat in Parliament after the Prime Minister called 3 by-elections, including one in Burnaby South, British Columbia, where Singh wants to run. But look, this is anything but a sure thing. With name recognition and fundraising problems, Jagmeet Singh faces an uphill battle. And if he loses, would he have difficulty staying on as the leader of the party, as his predecessor, Tom Mulcair, argues? Let's find out. Joining me now, NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Mr. Singh, I haven't seen you since the New Year. Happy New Year, and are you happy, finally, that you will get a chance to run for a seat in Parliament in Burnaby South?
Well, Happy New Year, and yes, I'm really happy that the hundreds and thousands of Canadians who've been waiting to have a chance to have representation now all have a chance. I'm really excited about the opportunity that gives to put pressure on this government to do what's right for people.
Right. Well, okay, so you're going to get a shot. It's not a sure thing there. Thomas Mulcair, the former leader, was on CTV this past week, and he said this is going to be a tough fight for you. And if you lose this riding, he said you will have a very tough time staying on as the leader and fighting in the federal election in 10 months. If you lose this by-election, can you remain leader, and will you remain leader?
So, I've already answered the question before. I'm going to be the leader that leads us into the 2019 election. But with respect to what I hear on the doorsteps, what I hear in Burnaby, people are really concerned about their future. And we know that the Conservatives aren't going to be raising the question in the House about the housing crisis. They're not going to be talking about that. We know that Conservatives aren't going to be saying we need medication coverage for all Canadians. That's not going to be what they talk about. But for the people that I speak to every single day, they're counting on me, they're counting on us to stand up for them. And that's why I know how much is riding on this. I know how much it counts for people, and that's what I'm focused on. I'm confident we'll do well in this riding, but I'm really worried about the future for Canadians.
All right, one last question about the politics. 10 months away from a federal election. Let's be candid. Your polls are terrible, right? You're low in the polls, you're not very well known, and you guys aren't raising almost any money. This was not what people signed up for when you became the leader. In 10 months, how do you turn that around, Mr. Singh?
Well, I'm really proud of our party, given that we had 2 years where we had a leader that was effectively voted out and things were really tough. We had a horrible fundraising in that period of time, and we had not a lot of traction. Despite that, it shows how resilient our movement is, how resilient what we've built is, that the fact that it still stayed so steady, and now we've actually turned things around. But more importantly,
by the way, it sounds like you're hammering Tom Mulcair.
What I'm hearing is that people... What I'm hearing is that people really need us.
Because he hammered you?
There's a lot of struggles out there, and people are depending on us to stand up for them. And so I understand how important that is, and that's really what drives me. And that's what's really my focus and my priority.
All right, people want to get to know you as the leader. Let's talk about a key issue. You're in British Columbia, where pipelines are a big issue. I know where you stand on the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion. You're against it. But there are protests across this country about an liquefied natural gas pipeline, and it's a $40 billion project. It has federal, provincial, and legal support from the courts, and every First Nation along the route, their elected chiefs, have supported this. I ask you a simple question. Do you, as the leader of the NDP, support this LNG pipeline?
Yeah, I've already mentioned my support for this project, given the fact that they've done consultation in a very meaningful way, broadly speaking. As you mentioned, the vast majority of Indigenous elected bands and chiefs have all shown support, and the consultation process was done in a very meaningful way, very much in line with what we'd like to see happen with all consultations moving forward, a respect of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. This is a tough path to walk down, but it's a very important path to walk down, and that's what we've seen in the consultations, and that's what we need to see with any energy project or any other project moving forward.
To be fair, sir, you sound exactly like Justin Trudeau. You're trying to distinguish yourself from Justin Trudeau. What would you do in the wake, if you were the Prime Minister in 10 months, what would you do with protests that are happening now across this country? There were barricades. A court gave these folks 72 hours, an injunction to enforce that injunction. If you were the Prime Minister, what would you do about these protests?
Well, first off, not be silent. When we saw the protests happening, immediately Nathan Cullen went out to meet with the community and speak with them. That's something important. Reconciliation requires dialogue. We didn't see the Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, do anything in respect of even mentioning this. I mentioned that the treatment of the protesters was concerning. What was happening was concerning, and we needed to see a support for a peaceful dialogue, and that's not something that the Prime Minister was able to do or even able to
with
speak
all
about.
Due respect,
what we need to do is,
Mr. Singh,
when we have these
circumstances,
we need to make sure we actually have dialogue. The Prime Minister didn't do that, didn't actually speak about this, didn't mention it, and I called on the Prime Minister to step up.
Okay, with all due respect, I'm just trying to figure that out. These are important issues. That does sound a bit like a word salad, like the Prime Minister had I'm not trying to defend him, but he had an open forum where people were yelling at him about this very thing. He took a lot of questions. When you say an open dialogue, in the end, the Premier of British Columbia, Premier Horgan, said, when people break the law has to be enforced. If you were the Prime Minister and there was a court injunction, would you tell the RCMP to arrest protesters who are violating a court injunction? Would you have the RCMP arrest protesters to enforce the rule of law? Yes or no?
I would encourage that all law enforcement speak with those who are raising concerns or protesting in a respectful manner, and make sure that there is a way to facilitate their discourse and their opposition in a way that's safe and in a way that's legal.
Let me just quickly talk about China, which is another big issue. This past week, the Chinese ambassador to Canada put out an editorial that accused Canada of having a double standard. They've detained 2 Canadians after Canada detained one of the business executives from Huawei, as you know, in Vancouver. But the ambassador from China accused Canada of, quote, white supremacy. If you were the Prime Minister, what would you say to the Chinese right now?
Sorry, who accused who of white supremacy?
The ambassador from China to Canada wrote an editorial. And he said there's a double standard between Canada's enforcement of the rule of law, and there's 2 Canadians, as you well know, detained. And he called Canada using white supremacy to enforce the rule of law. You're the Prime Minister. You got to respond to that. What's the response?
I don't know if there's any evidence of that suggestion. I know that there is a very important role that Canada plays in supporting the rule of law. There are concerns that folks legitimately are raising about the Trump administration and suggestions that the Trump administration is going to use arrests as a political tool in negotiations for trade, which is completely unacceptable and wrong. That should never happen. But the rule of law should be followed. It's something that we need to be partners with internationally to make sure that there is a reliable system that we know we can depend on, and that's what we have to follow.
Sir, I know you're criticizing the Trump administration, but China's detained 2 Canadians. I just wonder if you got your eye on the ball here. We've got 2 Canadians detained in China. What's your view on China, not on Trump?
Right. So with China's detention of Canadians, again, that is deeply concerning. We need to make sure that anyone that's being detained is being done. It's being done in an appropriate manner. It's being done in the right manner. There's actually a full due process. Laws are being followed, and their protection is paramount. We're concerned right now with the detention of Canadians in China. That is something that all Canadians are concerned with, and we want to see our country make sure that those folks are safe and that they're returned safely, and that the detention is being done not as a backlash to Canada following the rule of law.
Well, Mr. Singh, I got to leave it there. You're in the race now for Burnaby South, and we'll be watching that closely. I appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks so much.
A pleasure, Evan.